So Apple's first release of October was the iPad mini that was released via a press release, and they put the A17 Pro, got it ready for Apple Intelligence, and gave it Pencil Pro support. So the only thing left to update is going to be their Mac lineup with the M4 chips built into there, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about because we got some leaks of what that M4 chip could be capable of in these Macs. Let's get into it. So there should be 3 different computers that Apple updates with this brand new M4 chip, and as we all know, the M4 chip was introduced in the current only computer, which is the iPad Pro. And the M4 chip in the iPad Pro comes in 2 different variations. You have the one that comes with 8 gigs of RAM, and then the one that comes with 16 gigs of RAM, depending on what storage size you end up going with on your iPad Pro. I, for instance, have the M4 iPad Pro with 1 terabyte of storage, giving me a full 16 gigs of RAM. And for the most part, that M4 chip has been outstanding, especially when you compare it to something like the M2 or the M1 iPad Pro, which is the iPad Pro that I personally came from. So you get to see it in real world usage, see how much faster it is, see the performance overall. And for me, especially as somebody who edits their video and edits their thumbnails and does all their creative work on the iPad Pro versus something like a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, it's amazing to see just how much faster the raw and sheer power of the M4 iPad Pro is versus its predecessors. And again, I know people are going to say that iPadOS holds it back and things like that, but overall, if you are maybe rendering a video or exporting something or rendering something else or whatever the case may be, it's going to be exponentially faster than something like the M1 or M2 iPad Pro, and that's going to fully translate into the MacBook Pros that should be releasing at the end of this month with the M4, the M4 Pro, and the M4 Max. And you might have been seeing some leaks going around that Apple actually by accident or somebody leaked the current M4 MacBook Pro because we've been seeing boxes of it with people receiving it, only a few pictures here and there, but people have been able to actually test it, and that testing has already leaked, which is something that's pretty unheard of. And what we've seen right now is that we're going to get a substantial boost in performance compared to what we've been seeing year over year. Every year Apple comes out and they tell us, you know, you're going to get 15 to 20 to maybe 30% increase in performance, and usually those performance upgrades are so small that they end up comparing it to a 2 or 3-year-old device. So for instance, with the M3 MacBook Pro, they compared it to the M1 MacBook Pro and things like that. So now, from the M3 to the M4, we should be getting a 23% increase in performance in the single thread according to the Cinebench scores, and then up to a 50% increase in multi-thread, which is something, again, that's relatively unheard of when it comes to a year-over-year update. This means that the M4 chip is actually going to be faster than the M3 Pro chip that we currently have in the MacBook lineup. So again, we should be seeing some substantial upgrades overall, and I think a lot of this is going to have to do with the actual cooling as opposed to the actual sheer and raw power of the chip. Now, of course, Apple's going to let us know exactly what's going to be different about this chip. You know, it's all these transistors that were added, the billions and billions of activities and signals that can be sent in a split second. But what's going to be important is how they're actually going to be cooling this depending on what they're going to do internally with the chassis of the MacBook Pro. Because from a compute standpoint, what's needed inside of the MacBook Pro is relatively small, and that's where we're going to see an updated Mac Mini, which we'll touch on in a second, meaning that there's a ton of room for cooling and making sure that this thing is running as smoothly as possible and it doesn't overheat. So that's going to be the first thing. The first computers that we'll be getting it will be the MacBook Pros, and we should be getting an M4 version, an M4 Pro, and then finally an M4 Max version, which should blow us away, putting an absurd amount of RAM on here compared to what we've had last year. So that should be very interesting to see exactly how Apple ends up giving this to us, selling it to us, and finally letting us know what's been improved. But if you aren't somebody that isn't on the bleeding edge and doesn't need all that power, Apple will still be putting that M4 chip in 2 other computers that are a little bit on the more entry level. The first one is going to be the new Mac Mini. Now the new Mac Mini should be a complete redesign, and again, it's kind of tough to redesign just a square box, but at the end of the day, Apple will be redesigning this thing to be the same, if not similar form factor as the Apple TV. Because again, it goes back to the sizing on the internals and what's needed. For example, the current MacBook Air doesn't have any fans, and it doesn't need any fans because it's not pushing that much power. So Apple might take the same approach by removing the fan or just putting a very small cooling tech or cooling fan in there that isn't the same size as what we have in the current Mac Mini, allowing the form factor and the footprint to reduce in size by about 60%, which will be awesome because this is going to essentially be a pocket PC that you can bring wherever you are. And let's say you have an office desk setup that has, you know, your monitor, your keyboard, and your mouse set up over there, and you have the same setup at home, and you want to just move your computer around. You technically could have done this with the old Mac Mini, but this new one is just going to be that much easier because it's going to be that much more portable at that form factor. So definitely expect an M4 Mac Mini with a redesign that's a lot smaller and a lot more compact and also a lot more portable at the end of the day. Another thing to note about this Mac Mini is that you're going to have the M4 version and then probably an M4 Pro version. The M4 Max version will be reserved for the MacBook Pros in both the 14 and 16-inch variants, But we will be getting an M4 Pro version that should be announced at the same time as the regular M4, but it could be shipped at a later date compared to the regular M4 Mac Mini. And then lastly, Apple should be putting that same M4 chip into the iMac, giving us an M4 and also an M4 Pro version of these iMac kind of all-in-one computers. But one thing that's going to be nice about this is that hopefully and ideally, Apple will be debuting USB-C accessories alongside this M4 iMac. So think USB-C trackpad, USB-C Magic Mouse, and finally a USB-C keyboard, both in the regular size as well as a number pad size with Touch ID. So that should be one of the more welcome additions to the lineup because I'm somebody that would love to have USB-C accessories directly from Apple to really complete the entire ecosystem, because I believe those are the only things left that Apple currently sells that does not have a USB-C port and still relies on Lightning. And then for those wondering if the MacBook Air will be getting it, I doubt that the MacBook Air will be getting it, at least not here in October. We'll probably get it in the spring of 2025 alongside an M4 Mac Studio and an M4 Mac Pro at the end of the day. So definitely keep that in mind. I do not believe we'll be getting an M4 MacBook Air. And then in terms of timeline, like I mentioned, these should be announced towards the end of October, so giving us a few days before the announcement, and it'll most likely be announced via a press release the same way that an iPad mini was announced earlier this month, so definitely keep that in mind. And then we should be seeing shipments in November for these new M4 MacBook Pros, which I might get my hands on one just to test out, because again, we all know that I'm an M4 iPad Pro user first and foremost. But that's everything we expect from an M4 chip perspective. There's a lot of moving parts, but at the end of the day, like I said, we've already seen leaks of this M4 MacBook Pro being kind of passed around and shown around, so it's only a matter of time before Apple releases this via a press release and gets this into the hands of all of us to kind of just take advantage of and see exactly how much faster these things really are. But that'll do it for this video, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end of this video, and also leave a comment down below if you're going to end up picking one of these up. Are you coming from an older one? Are you coming from an M3? If you have an M3, are you going to upgrade to an M4? It all depends on how Apple ends up selling this, but it could be a substantial enough upgrade to go from M3 to M4, but I also know a lot of people that are still using, let's say, like their M1 Max MacBook Pros, and could be from then on going to the M4 MacBook Pros, but that remains yet to be seen. If you guys want to watch more videos like this one, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video right here, and I personally think you're going to like this video down here. But that'll do it, everybody. Until next time, I'm Fernando, and I'm out of here. Peace.